It turns out that some leaders in the GOP and even some physicians who voted for Donald Trump want to fight tooth and nail to ensure that we do not completely repeal Obamacare. Now, that's interesting considering the fact that these are individuals who either supported or voted for Donald Trump. So did they really know what they were getting themselves into? So we'll get to the physicians in a second, but before I talk to you about the Republican governors who are fighting to keep Obamacare in place, I just want to note that a lot of these physicians did not think that Donald Trump was going to go after Obamacare. They thought that he was just campaigning with that promise and he was acting like any politician would and that he wouldn't really follow through on some of the more extreme policy ideas. Well, they're obviously very surprised now. So among the Republican governors who want to protect Obamacare, you have John Kasich. Now, John Kasich was among the more reasonable members of the GOP that were running in this past election. And he thinks, look, the expansion of Medicare has been very, very helpful to people in my state, and I want to make sure that we protect that. There's also Rick Snyder, and here's what he had to say. Well, Rick Snyder is one of 16 Republican governors in states that have expanded Medicaid in their states, even though the Supreme Court ruled it wasn't mandatory under Obamacare. And by the way, let me clarify a mistake I made earlier. This is about Medicaid, not Medicare. So the expansion of Medicaid was not only popular, it saved a lot of lives. And there have been cases of people who, CNN, profiled the story of this woman who had a baseball-sized tumor, brain tumor, and she was told by her doctor that that was the case, and she's like, I don't have the money to pay for this. I gotta work. It is what it is. And they found out that she would be covered under Medicaid because of Obamacare, and they removed the tumor, and she's doing fine now. So there are all these stories throughout all these states, including states that have these, Republican governors. Also, Brian Sandoval of Nevada and Gary Herbert of Utah want to protect Obamacare.
Here's why it's absolutely ridiculous that the certain states decided not to expand their Medicaid coverage, because it was 100% funded by the federal government. They were going to do it until 2020, and then in 2020, the projections were that they would fund still 90% of it. So literally, if your state didn't expand Medicaid enrollment, that is only because your congressperson, your governor, did not like Barack Obama or did not like that policy and wanted to try to get it to fail.
Yep.
That is so selfish. It blows my mind.
Regardless, I mean, that aside, you still look at the implication here, which is within Obamacare, there was a state choice. Like, it's a state choice. And yeah, it seems like the Supreme Court was like, yeah, you got to leave it open. But it is a state choice. Their decision to do what they will with that money. And that's what's frustrating. Yeah, my argument here is like, yeah, eventually there might be like a repeal and replace of Obamacare. And if that happens, my biggest fear is the ability to declare some kind of weird victory for doing it and replacing it with something that ends up just be like a bad solution, but it reduces premiums for the average person. So what they're going to do is they're going to get, as much as people, and there's going to be a lag in between. You're going to have your new coverage, and you're going to pay less for it a month. But it is going to be crappy coverage that doesn't cover a catastrophic brain tumor.
I do not believe for a second, I mean, I could be wrong, right? But I don't believe for a second that premiums are going to decrease. Why would they? I mean, think about it. I hated the idea of the mandate because of the fact that it was what I guess, some of the more establishment Democrats felt would be a replacement for universal health care. What I mean by that is universal health care or a public option would provide a much more affordable option for people, right? And so Obama's reasoning was, well, if you have a federal mandate and you force everyone, including healthy individuals, to buy insurance, that'll keep premiums low. But there were no real cost caps. So it was a huge handout to private industry, and they're like, we can do whatever we want.
That's precisely why they allowed for pre-existing conditions, even though they fought tooth and nail.
Yes.
in the end were like, all right, whatever. And then we saw that the.
Let me finish my
Oh,
point.
sorry.
Okay, sorry. I just want to get
Go
to
ahead.
the premiums and why I don't think they're going to decrease. You get rid of the mandate, which is one of the things that Republicans hate the most, and I understand the anger toward that. But okay, what do you think insurance companies are going to do? They don't have healthy people paying into the system anymore because they don't have to, and they don't have to worry about a tax penalty. And then there's still insurance companies that are doing it for money. They're doing it for greedy reasons, not out of the kindness of their own hearts. So they're not going to be like, oh, we're not making as much money because these people aren't forced to buy our insurance. And so we're just going to up the premium of the people who are buying the insurance because they need it and they have to have it. You know, so I think it's actually going to be more expensive. I don't know.
I think there was one mandate that still they could cap it for individuals in need or like individuals over a certain age that really need it, because they obviously foresaw that the insurance providers would do that when they realized that healthy people just simply are not going. I mean, healthy people are simply just not going to sign on and pay the government instead. But then there's so much shady shit going on with that too, where you see certain, like the insurance provider pulling out Aetna, I think, is that how you say it? Aetna, pulling out of certain markets, claiming that they're simply not making enough money, and then further investigation showing that that's not the case at all, and they were just trying to bully the government.
They were bullying the government because they wanted to merge with a different health insurance company, and of course, because of antitrust laws, they weren't able to do that. And so they kind of wanted to sock it to the Obama administration, and the way they did it was they claimed that they dropped out because Obamacare was too expensive, they couldn't afford it.
And I'm on the other end of that, where I feel like what I'm terrified by, and Brett kind of mentioned this a little bit, is that because everyone was so adamant about making sure Obamacare failed, like these selfish Republican mostly, obviously, Congressmen, like they wanted Obamacare to fail so that they could just say, look, Democrats suck, Obama sucked, this legacy is bullshit, just for that specific political reason, right? And not only, like my fear is that after a period of time has passed, we're going to look back at this and go, see, obviously socialized medicine could never happen in the United States. As soon as we tried to do it, it didn't work, it failed. It didn't fail because the government didn't plan enough. It was actually cost efficient. It was lower, like it cost government lower. It was actually making money technically. When you look at it, but it doesn't matter. They tried to make it fail, and they still are, and eventually they'll use this so that they can go back to the private industry marketplaces where they figure out the pricing, and then we'll never have national health care.
This is the sad thing. It's like dealing with a child. That's the problem with Trump, and the way this leaves it so that the state governors are going to have to take up a fight against Trump.
Yeah.
And it's very strange because it seems like, look at what he's doing with the wall, the weird way that he's trying to justify the way Mexico can end up paying for the wall is if we levy a tax against imported goods which eventually will raise the price, so it's actually American consumers paying for the wall.
Right.
But it's this weird calculus of declaring victory. That's what he does. And so with this, maybe he'll just peel back Obamacare, put a new sticker on the same thing and say that he won somehow.
Who knows?
And
We'll see.
this is what's so frustrating for me is like that's a best case scenario.
Understand that there have been lots of physicians who had issues with Obamacare. They've been vocal about it. However, there is a significant amount of physicians who voted for Donald Trump and do not want him to repeal Obamacare. So these are researchers, David Grande and Craig Pollock, and they found that just 38% of primary care doctors who voted for Trump want him to repeal Obamacare. The rest do not support getting rid of the healthcare law, which is interesting. So let's take a look at this graph that they put together. I think it's super helpful. By the way, these are researchers from the University of Pennsylvania. And so these are primary care physicians who support the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And 32% of them are Republican, 0% of them are Democrats, 15% overall. Only 15% of primary care physicians support repealing the Affordable Care Act, which is kind of fascinating, especially because you would always hear from doctors in the news about how terrible Obamacare is, right? Because it's a doctor, he would know, she would know. And only 15% of them want to repeal it. So when it comes to Trump voters, 38%, and when it comes to Clinton voters, 0% want to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
Well,
You know why, right? Sorry, not to cut you off, but because a lot of doctors that were criticizing Obamacare were like, how do you say it?
Oh, yeah,
Esthetician?
Estheticians, like
anesthesiologists?
no, not anesthesiologists. No, like people that plastic surgeons, for example.
Right.
Because Obamacare had a very controversial aspect to it, where it was going to be there would be a performance-based payout system for doctors, and that was controversial amongst doctors that don't do anything that improves the quality of life of individuals. So that was controversial, and I understand why, but that's why primary care physicians would probably still be like, wait a minute, if more people are covered, more people will be able to come and,
And get the preventative
These people
care
have
that they
coverage.
need.
These people have coverage. They're not going to emergency rooms.
Yeah, that's a
You know,
great point.
they have. I know where my check is coming from. It's coming from the insurance provider, which people have now.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty straight.
almost
that's
20
the
million more,
Simplest
yeah.
explanation.
So I do want to comment just very quickly on the number of people who voted for Trump and they knowingly voted against their own interests, which I think is so fascinating. You see it with so many Trump voters. You see it with these physicians. I mean, these are doctors, you know, they're the best and brightest in our communities. And it's not like Donald Trump didn't constantly talk about repealing Obamacare. He did. And you know, there were a few quotes from these physicians in this piece, and they were just like, well, we just didn't think he was going to do it.
Yeah, and the other aspect is, like, you think of your average doctor is of a higher income bracket. What they're voting on as part of their identity is not their employment, but rather the other side tax breaks that they're looking forward to.
Yeah.
So I think that factors into it more, and that's what's so frustrating because, you know, again, going into this election, we have more information than we've ever had at our fingertips. We just don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
This is I did extensive coverage on the ACA, which is why I'm going to rattle this number off. But off the top of my head,
867-5309.
no. I think the majority of people they didn't appreciate Obamacare, right? It was unpopular in the end of the day when you look at it as Obamacare. Yet 74% of the people polled, the same people, wanted all the specific mandates.
Right.
It was all
Obamacare.
about the name used during the polling. So if the polling specified the healthcare, policy as Obamacare,
26-year-olds being able to be under their parents' insurance.
So they loved the specific parts of Obamacare that they were polled on, but once you just call it Obamacare, they would poll lower. We did stories on that as well.
It's just Obamacare versus, the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
They want the Affordable Care Act, and that's why you see Price going after it, calling like the Patient Care Initiative or the Patient Option, as opposed to what it will be called, price gouging.
If you like this Young Turks video, wait till you get a load of Young Turks membership. So many more shows and no ads at all. Come and see tytnetwork.com/join.